I spent $12,000 to expose my wife's lies, and it was the best money I ever spent. When I left those anniversary roses and that letter on her table, I thought I knew everything about her betrayal. I was wrong. What I discovered next about her double life would make any man's blood run cold. My 12-year-old son had to choose between his parents in court, and his decision shocked everyone in that room. Sometimes the only way to save your family is to destroy it first. My name is Ton Pierce. I'm 43 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the American dream locked down tight. I own 4 pizzeras across Springfield County, each one doing better than the last. Been working on turning them into a proper franchise operation, the kind of business that could set up my family for generations. My wife Sasha, she's 39, used to light up when I talk about expansion plans, used to being the key phrase there. We've got a 12-year-old son named Zane, smart kid, plays Little League, gets good grades, the kind of boy who still thinks his old man hung the moon. That alone should have been enough to keep any woman happy, but apparently it wasn't. The first red flag hit me about 8 months back. Sasha started working late more often, saying her marketing job at the hospital was demanding overtime. Fair enough, healthcare is a tough business, but then she began dressing different for work. Nicer clothes, new perfume, spending an hour getting ready instead of 20 minutes. When I complimented her, she'd just shrug it off. Then came the phone calls. She'd step outside to take them, saying it was work stuff. But I've been running businesses for 15 years. I know what work calls sound like. These weren't work calls. These were the kind of conversations that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. The nail in the coffin came during our anniversary planning. 16 years of marriage deserves something special, so I suggested that mountain resort we talked about visiting. Sasha got this look, not excited but trapped, like I just asked her to spend the weekend in prison. Maybe we should just do something simple this year, she said, not meeting my eyes. Dinner home, keep it low-key. That's when I knew. You don't ask to keep your 16th anniversary low-key unless you're already planning to make it your last. I started paying attention after that. Real attention. The way she'd tint up when I walked into a room. How she'd angle her phone away from me. The new passwords on everything. The sudden interest in working out and buying clothes I'd never seen before. But the moment that really broke me was last Tuesday night. I came home early from checking on the downtown location, hoping to surprise her. Found her in our bedroom on the phone, laughing like she was 16 again. She didn't even hear me come up the stairs. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, she whispered into the phone, her voice soft and intimate. This secret is killing me, but in the best way. I stood there in the hallway for maybe 30 seconds listening to her plan a lunch date with someone who wasn't her husband. When she finally noticed me, she jumped like she'd been shot and quickly said goodbye to whoever was on the other end. "We're call," she said, but her face was red as a stop sign. That night, I made my decision. Our anniversary was coming up in 5 days. If she wanted to play games, I'd give her one last hand to remember me by. The roses were perfect, deep red, just like the ones I bought her for our first anniversary 16 years ago. I'd driven to 3 different flower shops to find the exact shade because details matter when you're making a statement that'll last forever. I arranged them in the crystal vase we got as a wedding gift from my Aunt Margaret. Set them right in the center of our dining room table next to the good china I'd laid out for 2. The letter was tucked under the vase. White envelope. Her name written in my careful handwriting across the front. Zane was at his friend Tommy's house for a sleepover. Perfect timing. This conversation needed to happen without little ears listening from the staircase. I'd written that letter 4 times before I got it right, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every word to cut clean. No anger, no shouting, just truth served cold as winter air. The front door opened at 6:30, right on schedule. Sasha always came home at the same time on Fridays, like clockwork. I heard her heels clicking on the hardwood, heard her purse hit the counter in the kitchen. "Dalton," she called out, "you home early?" I was upstairs in her bedroom, watching through the window that looked down on the driveway. Wanted to see her face when she walked into that dining room. Call it morbid curiosity, but after 16 years of marriage, I figured I'd earned the right to witness the moment my wife realized the game was over. She walked past the dining room twice, once going to the kitchen, once coming back with a glass of wine in her hand. On the 3rd pass, she finally stopped. Even from upstairs, I could see her body language change. The wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Her free hand went to her throat like she was having trouble breathing. She approached that table like it was a crime scene, picked up the envelope with 2 fingers like it might explode. For a long moment, she just stood there staring at her name written in my handwriting. Then she opened it. I kept the letter short. 3 paragraphs, each one designed to strip away another layer of the lies she'd been living. The first paragraph told her I knew. The second paragraph told her how I knew. The third paragraph told her what happened next. I watched her read it once, then again. Saw her legs give out as she sank into the chair. The wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. Red liquid spreading like blood across the boards we had refinished together 5 years ago. That's when I walked downstairs. Sasha looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, holding my letter like it was a death sentence, which in a way it was. Dalton, she whispered, her voice breaking, please let me explain. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, keeping my voice steady as granite. 16 years, Sasha, 16 years. I gave you everything I had. Now you want to explain? Sasha sat there in that chair, clutching my letter like it was the last piece of solid ground in an earthquake. The wine was still spreading across the floor, dark red, staining the wood we chosen together when we bought this house. Who is he? I asked, keeping my voice level. No shouting, no drama, just a man asking his wife a simple question. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked down at the letter again. Dalton, it's not what you think. Reed is just Reed, I repeated, cutting her off. So now he has a name. That's progress. Her hands were shaking. Good. Maybe for the first time in months, she was feeling what I'd been carrying around every single day. How long? I asked. It's complicated, she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms. Sasha, I've got all night. Make it simple. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's dog barking, the sound of normal life continuing while mine fell apart in real time. 6 months, she finally said. But Dalton, I never meant for it to happen. He's going through a divorce and we were just friends at first. Friends, I said. Is that what you call sneaking around behind your husband's back, planning secret lunches, lying about working late? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out of the yard where Zane played catch with me every evening after school. You were going to tell me what exactly? That you've been cheating on me for half a year? That every time you kiss me goodnight, you were thinking about another man? That's not fair, she said, her voice getting stronger, more defensive. I turned around to face her. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I worked 16-hour days building those restaurants so you could have the life you wanted. I came home every night to a wife who was already gone. Just didn't have the guts to say it. She stood up, too, the letter falling to the floor. You think this is all my fault? When was the last time we had a real conversation? Dalton? When was the last time you looked at me like I was more than just the woman who keeps your house clean? There was the blame game. The classic cheater's playbook. Make it his fault somehow. So, you decided to find someone who would look at you the right way. I said someone else's husband. Her face went white. How did you know he was married? I almost smiled. Almost. Because I hired a private investigator. Sasha. Because when your wife starts acting like a stranger, you find out why. The look on Sasha's face when I mentioned the private investigator was worth every penny I'd paid the man. Pure terror. Like watching someone realize they'd been playing chess while their opponent was holding all the cards. You hired someone to follow me? She whispered. I hired someone to find out the truth. I corrected. Turns out you've been real busy these past 6 months. Coffee dates, lunch meetings, that weekend trip to St. Louis you said was for your sister's birthday. Her hands went to her face. Oh God. Your sister lives in Kansas City. Sasha has for 8 years. But you and Reed had a real nice time at that bed and breakfast, didn't you? I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos. Nothing inappropriate. I'm not that kind of man. But pictures of her car in the parking lot, of them walking into the lobby together, of them having dinner at some fancy restaurant while I was home helping Zane with his math homework. She sank back into the chair like all the fight had gone out of her. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to pack a bag. I said, tonight, go stay at your sister's place, the real one in Kansas City. Give me time to figure out how to tell our son that his mother decided our family wasn't worth fighting for. You can't keep Zane from me, she said, suddenly finding her backbone again. I'm not keeping him from you. I'm keeping him from watching his parents tear each other apart. There's a difference. I walked over to the hutch, pulled out the folder I prepared. Copies of the investigator's report, photos, phone records, everything laid out neat and clean. This is what $12,000 buys you these days, I said, setting it on the table. Proof that my wife of 16 years decided to throw our marriage away for some excitement. She stared at the folder like it was a snake. $12,000. The cost of truth. Sasha. Turns out it's more expensive than I thought, but less expensive than staying ignorant. She opened the folder, flipped through a few pages, then closed it fast. Dalton, please, we can work through this. I'll end it with Reed. We can go to counseling. No, I said, and the finality in my voice surprised even me. We can't work through this. You didn't make a mistake. Sasha, you made a choice. Every single day for 6 months, you chose him over me, over Zane, over the family we built together. I headed for the stairs, then stopped and looked back at her. The divorce papers will be filed Monday morning. You got until Sunday night to figure out how you want to explain this to Zane. But Sasha, I waited until she looked up at me. If you try to make me the bad guy in this story, that folder goes public. Every detail, every photo, every lie you told me while you were playing house with Reed. She was crying again, but I was done being moved by her tears. The phone rang at 7:30 Sunday morning. I knew who it was before I even looked at the caller ID. Garrison Walsh, Sasha's father, city councilman, local big shot, who thought his money and connections made him untouchable. Dalton. His voice came through the speaker like gravel in a cement mixer. We need to talk. Morning to you, too, Garrison, I said, pouring my coffee. Sasha told you the news. I take it. She told me you've lost your mind, he said, hiring private investigators, threatening to air your dirty laundry in public. That's not how civilized people handle these things. I almost laughed. Civilized people like his daughter sneaking around behind my back for 6 months was civilized. How would you suggest I handle it? I asked. Turn the other cheek. Pretend it never happened. I suggest you think about your son, Garrison said, his voice getting harder. Think about your business. Think about how ugly this could get if you don't handle it with some discretion. There was the threat wrapped in fatherly concern. Garrison Walsh didn't make suggestions. He made demands backed by the kind of power that could make life difficult for a small business owner. Is that a threat, Garrison? It's advice, he said, from someone who's been in this town a lot longer than you have. Someone who knows how these things work. I set my coffee down, looked out the window at Zane's shooting baskets in the driveway. My kid playing alone on a Sunday morning because his mother was hiding out her sister's place, too ashamed to face what she'd done. Let me give you some advice in return, I said. Your daughter made her choice. She can live with the consequences. And if you try to use your position to hurt my business or my family, that folder of evidence I mentioned, it goes to every newspaper, every blog, every social media account in the county. The silence on the other end lasted long enough for me to know I'd hit my target. You don't want to make an enemy of me, son, Garrison said finally. I didn't make an enemy of you, I replied. Your daughter did that when she decided to destroy my family. But since we're making threats, here's mine. Stay out of my divorce, stay out of my business, and we'll keep this between adults. But if you come after me or my son, I'll make sure everyone in Springfield County knows exactly what kind of family you raised. I hung up before he could respond. Zane came in from the driveway, basketball tucked under his arm, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Dad, he said, when's Mom coming home? The question I'd been dreading since Friday night. How do you tell a 12-year-old boy that his mother chose another man over her family? Sit down, son, I said. We need to have a talk. Telling Zane the truth about his mother was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than starting my first business with nothing but a loan and a prayer. Harder than watching my own father waste away in a hospital bed. Harder than anything I thought life could throw at a man. But Zane deserved the truth. Not the sugar-coated version tell kids to protect their feelings. The real truth delivered with respect for his intelligence and his right to understand why his world was falling apart. Your mom and I are getting divorced, I said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. And it's not because we had some argument or grew apart or any of those things you might hear other people say. Zane nodded, his face serious in that way kids get when they know something big is coming. She's been seeing another man, I continued. Someone from her work. She's been lying to both of us about it for months. I watch my son's face change, watch the innocence drain out his eyes and get replaced by something harder, older, something number 12-year-old should have to carry. Is that why she's been acting weird? He asked. Why she's never home anymore? Yeah, buddy, that's why. Zane was quiet for a long minute, turning his basketball in his hands like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Are you going to fight for custody? He asked. The question surprised me. Most kids his age wouldn't even know what custody meant. but Zane had always been sharp. "I'm going to fight for what's best for you," I said, "which means you'll live here with me, but you'll still see your mom whenever you want." "What if I don't want to see her?" he asked, and the pain in his voice nearly broke me. "Then that's your choice to make," I said. "But Zane, she's still your mother. She made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you." He shook his head. "If she loved me, she wouldn't have done this to our family." Smart kid, smarter than his mother. Apparently, the doorbell rang before I could respond. Through the window, I could see Sasha's car in the driveway. She come to talk to Zane herself. "You want to see her?" I asked. Zane stood up, grabbed his basketball. "Not really, but I guess I should hear what she has to say." I opened the door to find Sasha standing on the porch like a stranger asking for directions. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Dalton," she said softly, "is Zane here? I need to talk to him." "He's in the kitchen," I said, stepping aside. "But Sasha, if you try to make me the bad guy in this story, if you try to twist the truth to make yourself feel better, I'll stop being civilized real quick." She nodded, walked past me into the house. I followed, not because I didn't trust her with our son, but because Zane might need backup when his mother tried to explain the unexplainable. Sasha sat down across from Zane, reached for his hand. He pulled it away. "Zane, honey," she started, "I know your dad told you what happened. I know you're angry with me." "I'm not angry," Zane said, his voice flat. "I'm disappointed." The word hit Sasha like a physical blow. She started crying, but Zane just sat there watching her like he was studying a stranger. "I never meant for this to happen," she said through her tears, "but it did happen." Zane replied, "And you chose him over us." Wednesday afternoon, I put my plan into action. It was time to show Reed exactly what kind of woman he'd been sneaking around with, and time to show Sasha what happened when you played games with the wrong man. I've been doing my homework on Reed Morrison for 2 weeks. 34 years old, married to a woman named Jennifer for 8 years, 2 kids under 10, worked as a financial advisor at Pinnacle Investment Group downtown, nice house in the suburbs, coached his daughter's soccer team on weekends, the kind of man who looked good on paper, but apparently had no problem destroying families when it suited him. The beautiful thing about Reed's situation was that he thought he was the only one. My private investigator had confirmed what I suspected. Sasha hadn't told him she was married. As far as Reed knew, she was a divorced single mother who had been hurt by her ex-husband and was ready to start fresh with someone who appreciated her. So, I decided to arrange a little meeting between Reed and the truth. I called Pinnacle Investment Group that morning, made an appointment to discuss my business retirement planning, asked specifically for Reed Morrison, said a friend had recommended him. The receptionist was happy to schedule me for 3 o'clock that afternoon. At 2:45, I walked into Reed's office carrying a thick folder and wearing my best suit, the same suit I'd worn at my wedding 16 years ago. "Mr. Pierce," Reed said, standing up to shake my hand, "please have a seat. I understand you're interested in discussing retirement planning for your business." "Actually," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk, "I'm more interested in discussing my wife." The color drained from Reed's face like someone had pulled a plug. "Your wife," he said, his voice suddenly careful. I opened the folder, pulled out an 8x10 wedding photo of Sasha and me, set it on his desk where he couldn't miss it. "Sasha Pierce," I said, "I believe you two have been getting acquainted." Reed stared at that photo like it was a death warrant, which in a way it was. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," he said. "No misunderstanding," I replied, "just lies. She told you she was divorced, didn't she? Told you her ex-husband was a real piece of work who didn't appreciate what he had." Reed's hands were shaking. "Mr. Pierce, I had no idea that she was married, that she had a 12-year-old son who asks me every night when his mommy's coming home, that she's been lying to both of us for 6 months." I pulled out another photo, this one from the investigator's file. Reed and Sasha having lunch at a restaurant across town, holding hands across the table like teenagers. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to call Sasha right now. You're going to tell her it's over. And you're going to explain to your wife, Jennifer, what you've been doing while she's been home raising your children. You can't make me." "Actually, I can." I pulled out the last document in my folder because if you don't, Jennifer gets copies of everything. Your boss gets copies. Your daughter's soccer team gets copies. Everyone in your nice little suburban life gets to know exactly what kind of man you really are. Reed Morrison, financial advisor and family man, sat there looking like someone had just told him his house was on fire. Reed made the call right there in his office with me sitting across from him. listening to every word. His hands shook as he dialed Sasha's number and his voice broke twice during the conversation. "Sasha," he said when she answered, "we need to talk. Right now." I could hear her voice through the phone, bright and happy, probably thinking he was calling to make plans for another secret meeting. "No, not tonight," Reed continued. "We can't see each other anymore. It's over." The silence from Sasha's end was so complete. I thought the call had dropped. Then came the questions, rapid fire and desperate. "Because I just found out you're married," Reed said, looking at me with eyes full of panic. "Because you lied to me about everything." More silence. Then Sasha's voice got louder, angry. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. She was trying to explain, to justify, to find some way to make this not her fault. "No," Reed said firmly, "there's no explanation for this. You destroyed my marriage for a lie. You made me destroy my family for someone who doesn't even exist." He hung up before she could respond. "There," he said, setting the phone down with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "It's done." "Not quite," I said. "Now you call your wife, please," Reed said, and for the first time, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Don't make me destroy my family." "You already destroyed your family," I replied. "I'm just making sure you face the consequences like a man instead of hiding like a coward." Reed stared at his phone for a long minute, then picked it up and dialed his home number. "Jennifer," he said when his wife answered, "I need to come home. We need to talk about something important." He hung up and looked at me like a man facing a firing squad. "She'll divorce me," he said. "Take the kids, take the house, everything." "Maybe," I said, standing up and collecting my photos. "Or maybe she'll be a better woman than you deserve and find a way to forgive you. Either way, that's between you and her now." I headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at him. "Reed, let me give you some advice. When you get home tonight, you tell Jennifer everything, every detail, every lie, every moment you spent betraying her trust, because if you don't, I will." I left him sitting there in his office staring at that wedding photo of Sasha and me, finally understanding what kind of woman he'd been sneaking around with. My phone rang before I even got to the parking lot. Sasha, of course, probably trying to figure out how her perfect little fantasy had just exploded in her face. I let it ring. She'd had 6 months to talk to me when it mattered. Now she could live with the silence she created. When I got home, Zane was in the driveway shooting baskets. He looked up when I pulled in and I could see the question in his eyes. "Did you do something, Dad?" he asked. "Mom called here crying about an hour ago. Said someone was trying to ruin her life." I grabbed the basketball, took a shot from the free throw line. Nothing but net. "Sometimes, son," I said, "people ruin their own lives. They just need help seeing it clearly." Zane nodded like that made perfect sense to him, which it did. 12 years old and my boy already understood that actions have consequences. That evening, Sasha called 6 more times. I didn't answer any of them, whatever she had to say. I'd already heard enough lies to last me a lifetime. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I walked into that courtroom wearing my best suit and carrying 3 folders full of evidence that would make Sasha's lawyer wish he'd never taken the case. Judge Patricia Williams had been on the bench for 15 years, and she had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, perfect for what I had in mind. Sasha sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, David Morrison, no relation to Reed, just another expensive lawyer her father had hired to try to clean up the mess she'd made. She looked nervous, which was smart of her. "Your Honor," Morrison began, "my client is seeking an equitable division of marital assets and joint custody of the minor child. Mrs. Pierce admits that the marriage has broken down, but she maintains that both parties bear responsibility for the deterioration of the relationship." I almost smiled. They were going to try the mutual fault defense. My lawyer, Tom Richardson, stood up next. Tom had been practicing family law for 25 years and he didn't lose cases he shouldn't lose. "Your Honor," Tom said, "the evidence will show that this marriage ended because of Mrs. Pierce's deliberate and prolonged adultery. We have documentation, photographs, and witness testimony that clearly establishes a pattern of deception and betrayal." For the next hour, Tom laid out our case like a master craftsman building a house. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Sasha and Reed, hotel receipts from their weekend trips, photos from the private investigator. Reed signed statement admitting to the affair and confirming that Sasha had lied to him about her marriage status. The most damaging evidence came when Tom called Zane to the witness stand. My 12-year-old son walked up there with his shoulders back and his head high, ready to tell the truth about his mother's lies. "Zane," Tom said gently, Has your mother discussed a relationship with Mr. Morrison with you? Yes, sir, Zane replied clearly. She told me he was just a friend from work, but I heard her talking to him on the phone late at night when she thought I was asleep. What did you hear? She told him she loved him, and she made plans to meet him when she was supposed to be working late. Judge Williams took notes during Zane's testimony, her face growing sterner with each revelation. When it was Morrison's turn to present Sasha's case, he tried to argue that I've been emotionally distant, that the marriage had been failing for years, that Sasha's affair was a symptom rather than a cause. But when Tom cross-examined Sasha, she fell apart under questioning, admitted to lying about working late, admitted to taking weekend trips with Reed while telling me she was visiting her sister, admitted to telling Reed that we were separated when we weren't. Mrs. Pierce, Tom said, do you believe your son should live with a parent who has demonstrated a pattern of dishonesty? Sasha started crying then, but Judge Williams wasn't moved by tears. In the matter of Pierce versus Pierce, Judge Williams announced after a 30-minute recess, I find that the marriage has been irretrievably broken due to the adultery of the defendant. Custody of the minor child is awarded to the plaintiff with supervised visitation for the defendant. The defendant's share of marital assets is reduced by 30% due to marital misconduct. Garrison Walsh's influence hadn't been enough to save his daughter from the consequences of her choices. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, life had settled into a rhythm that actually worked. Zane and I had become a team in ways I never expected, and the kid was thriving despite everything his mother had put us through. The pizza business was doing better than ever. Turned out that all the time I'd been spending worrying about my marriage, I should have been focusing on expansion. I'd signed franchise agreements with 3 new locations and had investors interested in taking the concept statewide. Zane was playing travel baseball now, and I made every game. Funny how much more time you have when you're not constantly wondering where your wife really is and who she's really with. Sasha had moved to Kansas City to live with her sister. Just like I told her do that first night, she called Zane twice a week and saw him one weekend in a month, which was about as much contact as he wanted with her. The kid was polite but distant, like he was talking to a stranger who used to live in our house. Dad, Zane said one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner, are you ever going to get married again? The question caught me off guard. Maybe someday. Why? Because you deserve someone who won't lie to you, he said simply. 12 years old and my son understood loyalty better than his mother ever had. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a nice woman who ran the bookstore downtown. Sarah Mackenzie divorced herself, 2 kids. Understood what it meant to rebuild your life after someone you trusted decided to tear it down. Reed Morrison had lost everything just like I predicted. His wife, Jennifer, had divorced him and taken the kids to Colorado to live with her parents. He'd been fired from Pinnacle Investment Group for conduct unbecoming and was apparently selling insurance, now trying to rebuild a career he destroyed for a 6-month affair with a married woman. Sometimes I almost felt sorry for him almost. As for Garrison Walsh, his threats had turned out to be empty bluster. Turns out that when you've got documentation of political corruption and threats to use public resources for personal vendettas, even city councilmen have to back down. He'd resigned his position after the local newspaper started asking questions about his abuse of power. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like we'd opened all the windows and let fresh air chase out years of accumulated lies. Zane had his friends over more often. The place was full of laughter again, and I'd learned to cook more than just frozen pizza and takeout. One evening in late spring while Zane was at baseball practice, I sat on the back porch with a beer and thought about the man I'd been a year ago. Worried, suspicious, afraid to trust his own instincts, willing to make excuses for a woman who was planning his destruction while he slept beside her every night. That man was gone. In his place was someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to tolerate being destroyed by someone who's supposed to protect you. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Good luck at Zane's game tonight. Looking forward to dinner tomorrow. I smiled, finished my beer, and headed inside to get ready for another evening of watching my son play the game he loved in a life we'd built together from the ashes of someone else's lies. Sometimes the best revenge is simply building something better than what got torn down.